Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be going through the 3.25 Path of Exile expansion Settlers of Kalguur patch notes. Now this is a massive list of changes. These are all just the things I can jump down to, but there's a lot here. And it'll just keep going faster and faster. There's a lot to go through, so I'm probably not going to read through all of this. I'm probably going to mainly look through ascendancy changes, skill changes, and whatever else seems to jump out at me that wasn't covered in the reveal. Like, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So I'm going to try and cut it down as much as I can, but a lot to go through here. The Settlers Challenge League, introducing all of the new Settlers of Kalguur content that was shown in the reveal. New content and features. New strength skill gem Crushing Fist. Retaliate against a blocked hit by slamming a huge armored fist into the ground in front of you. Vengeful Cry. Retaliate against a savage hit with a war cry, taunting all nearby enemies to attack the user. The user and nearby allies gain a buff which grants rage and prevents rage from being lost. Another new strength support gem. Overexertion supports melee attack skills which can be exerted, causing them to deal more damage for each warcry exerting them. Cannot modify the skills of minions. Vaal skills and channeling skills cannot be exerted. So this gives you a bonus for the number of warcries exerting the attack. So some play for stacking lots of warcries, it would seem. Strength Dex skill gem Eviscerate. Retaliate against a blocked hit with an arcing slash that releases 2 waves of force. Enemies in front of you can be hit by both waves. Requires a sword or axe and a shield. Sword Storm. Strength Dex gem. Retaliate against a blocked hit with a hail of blades that rains down in front of you. Requires dual wielding melee weapons and deals the damage of both weapons with each hit. It's cool. I think we got to see this in the reveal being used. Support gem Expert Retaliation. Supports retaliation skills, causing them to have more cooldown recovery rate and become usable for longer. A new Dex Strength skill gem. Is there a difference between a Strength Dex gem and a Dex Strength gem? I don't know. Glacial Shield Swipe. Retaliate against a blocked hit with a sweep of your shield, unleashing a wave of ice in a cone in front of you. A support gem called Rupture supports attack skills, critical strikes, which inflict bleeding, with supported skills also inflict rupture. This was the Ascendancy node that was on Deadeye. And Int Strength skill gem Divine Retribution. Retaliate against a blocked hit with a surge of divine power, causing multiple waves of lightning blasts to expand outward from the target location. A new keystone called Arsenal of Vengeance. To the southwest of the duelist starting location. Arsenal of Vengeance provides damaging retaliation skills become usable every 6th hit from enemies instead, so you wouldn't have to block. You could bypass the block to use the retaliation stuff. Interesting. Added 60 new armor base item types. 18 helmets, 18 body armors, 12 gloves, and 12 boots. These can be found in the in-game. That's a lot. Should be cool. Uniques added to the core drop pool. Gratis Signet, Navalia's Inheritance, the Hand of Phrygia, and Varuso's Ambition. The uniques created in the graveyard. 15 new uniques, 5 new div cards, 72 foiled unique item options from Voidborn Reliquary Key, more Valdos maps, the new chisels they showed off, the prismatic oil we've seen, 3 new Grandmasters, added icons to monster health bars to display whether or not they are armored. We've also taken the opportunity to examine the armor of different monster types to make sure they're appropriate. Cool. Creating a solo self-found character no longer requires you to have previously freed the Scion on your account. I dislike this change. You should have to free the Scion to play the Scion. Added a slot for stacked decks to the currency stash tab. New surprises to the campaign. Cool. Melee improvements. Melee totem skills removal. To compensate for that change, they have buffed the damage on almost every single melee skill. As the majority of this damage growth comes from gem levels, we have also made them cost more mana as they level, but it's still nothing like the mana cost on spells. So Ancestral Protector, Ancestral Warchief, Vaal Ancestral Warchief, and Earthbreaker support no longer exist. Players who have purchased the Iron Maiden or Void Ancestral Warchief microtransaction skill effects will have these removed shortly after the launch of Settlers of Kalguur, and the points spent on those microtransactions will be returned to your account. Existing versions of Forbidden Shaco and Replica Dragonfang's Flight with any of these removed gems will now provide another gem. The Dawnstrider unique boots no longer gives buffs to ancestor totems. These changes affect existing versions of the item. It now also has 3 to 5% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. Oh, it now has socketed slam skills are supported by level 25 Earthbreaker. That is the only source of Earthbreaker in the game. Buffs from active ancestor totem lingers for 3 seconds. Totem mastery has been removed. The large wheel of totem passive skills in the duelist starting area has been removed. Panopticon been completely removed. Ironwood is now moved to a secondary notable in the Shamanistic Fury Totem cluster, which is this out here. There will now be the Ironwood buff, which gives the additional armor per summon totem, the increased totem life, and totem resistance. Very strong node. Doesn't say anything about surveillance, though. Oh, then they completely reworked Ironwood. No longer gives the armor, no longer gives the Elirez. It now provides 40% increased totem life and 40% additional physical damage reduction. Okay. Surveillance now has its own cluster to the southeast of the duelist starting location with small passives giving attacks used by totems have 6% increased attack speed. So now the small totem life and physical damage reduction passives are now for Elirez and not the physical damage reduction. If you want the physical damage reduction, you have to go get Ironwood, which is further south on the tree. So that is talking about these small nodes here. This one having additional physical damage reduction. This is now going to be the same as this one. The physical damage reduction won't be there. It's instead going to be down here on Shamanistic Fury. There are 2 small totem attack and placement speed passives that have been changed to, instead of giving attack speed, giving totem damage in the very bottom right with the watchtowers, which is mainly for ballista totems anyways. If you want the speed, you'd have to go for surveillance, which won't be as far away now. Banner rework. Instead of having a reservation cost, they are now free. However, they don't grant a permanent buff. Banners now need to be placed for the effect to be active. However, once placed, they are far more powerful than before. They also automatically deactivate once you leave their area. Additionally, there are new ways to prolong the effects and more ways to invest in them than ever before. And that uses something called Valor, which the changes to these skills I don't know how are going to work until we can see the banners and play around with it. Another new cluster causes banner skills to have increased area of effect and give resistances to you and allies. Another new cluster giving you 3 endurance and frenzy charges when you consume maximum Valor to place a banner. So I would imagine Valor kind of works as the stages on the banners as they would use to build up. Awe and Terror provides banners also cause killed enemies to have a 20% chance to explode, dealing 1/10 of their life as physical damage, as well as banner skill AoE. Crazy. That's strong. Banners also maim enemies. Oh, so these are masteries for banners. Gain 5 Valor when you Warcry. Recover 3% of life per 5 Valor when you place a banner. Remove a random ailment when you consume at least 10 Valor to place a banner. Banners also cause enemies to take 8% increased damage. I believe this would be scalable by aura effect. Maybe. Causes enemies. It might have needed this effect of non-curse auras from skills on enemies, which is no longer provided by Bannerman. There might be a way to scale that up though. Rage rework. Rage has been made more fundamental and discoverable. Rage now grants 1% more attack damage per rage gained to a maximum of 30, but no longer inherently gains attack speed or movement speed. You lose 10 rage every 1 second if you have not been hit or gained rage in the last 2 seconds. Previously, 1 rage every 0.5 seconds. But there's a lot more ways to gain rage now. I think it's more of a fluid system. Many sources of rage now generate rage much more quickly. There is now a shared cooldown preventing you from generating rage on hit from more than 1 hit every 0.5 seconds. A number of rage-related stats have had their wording updated to make it more clear that they scale with increased rage effect. Rage effect applies to the damage inherently granted by rage and other bonuses granted per X rage if you have any. Bonuses while you have a certain amount of rage or other effects that refer to your rage but do not cause rage to grant additional stats are not affected. Berserker Ascendancy changed with rage, Chainbreaker Timeless Keystone passive, and the Comb Spirit unique gloves have been updated to state their rage regeneration stats do not delay the inherent loss of rage. Bear's Girdle doesn't get the percent fizz damage per 10 rage. It now only gives 10 max rage of previously 20. Comb's Primacy unique axe no longer has rage on crit. Instead, it now has gain 5 rage on melee hit. That seems awesome. The Ravenous Passion unique helmet no longer has rage grants cast speed instead of attack speed. Alright, so I guess this league was the chance to play around with that, because it's gone. It now gives 7 to 10 rage instead of 10 to 15, and a Divine Orb can be used to make existing items worse. Rigwald's Savagery unique axe now has plus 10 max rage while wielding a sword, previously 25. The Maltreatment axe implicit now is gain 3 rage on melee hit instead of the max rage, and that scales up to the higher value base types. A rage cluster with a notable giving 10 max rage, and then more passive changes there, and new rage masteries. Every rage also grants 1% increased stun threshold. That's good. 1% movement speed per 5 rage, plus 7 max rage. Inherent loss of rage is faster. War cries grant 1 rage per 5 enemy power up to 5. Increase maximum total life recovery per second from leech while at max rage and nearby enemies are intimidated while you have rage. So this would be removed from the attack masteries, I would imagine. Tinctures added to the core game, and now a primary piece of the Warden Ascendancy class. You can place a tincture in one of your belt slots instead of a flask. While a tincture is active, it grants you a powerful buff to your melee attacks, but inflicts mana burn on you, draining your mana at an increasing rate the longer the tincture has been active. The tincture can be manually deactivated or will automatically deactivate when you run out of mana. So big changes to how the tinctures work. It's not something that's just always up. If you have it on, you have to actually plan when you're going to use it. You can inherently only have 1 tincture active at a time. Tinctures also have a cooldown, so once you have deactivated one, no tincture can be activated for a time. Like flasks, tinctures can be magic or unique, but not rare. NPCs in towns may now have tinctures available to purchase. And then there's keystones. You can turn the mana burn into a life degen called Weeping Wounds. Flasks adjacent to applied tincture gain 2 charges when you hit an enemy with a weapon no more than once every second. 15% chance for tincture not to inflict mana burn and causes tinctures applied to you to have 10% reduced mana burn rate. It's cool. Cluster of passives can increase the tincture cooldown recovery rate. Tinctures have increased effect. And if you've used a light flask recently, and a burst of energy passive that allows you to recover 15% of mana when you activate a tincture. And tincture masteries, the first 6 stacks of mana burn have no effect. Increased evasion rating while you have an active tincture. Increased flask charges gained per mana burn on you. That's interesting. Flasks adjacent to applied tincture have 10% increased effect when used if you've hit an enemy with a weapon recently, or tinctures deactivate when you have 12 or more mana burn. Then retaliation skills. The counterattack skills, Reckoning, Riposte, and Vengeance have been removed. And there's retaliation clusters and things on the tree. Every 4th retaliation, always critical strikes, increased speed, retaliation skills fortify on melee hits. And there are retaliation masteries. Increased duration of ailments inflicted by Retaliation Skills. Retaliation Skills debilitate enemies. Increased armor for each different Retaliation skill used in the past 10 seconds. 10% chance when you use a Retaliation skill for a different Retaliation skill to become usable. And reduced cost of Retaliation skills there. Endgame Improvements. 6 slots to map device. In maps tier 16 and above, you can now enter the Asmeri Wildwood from Affliction, although there are no NPCs, Nameless Seer, or King in the Mists. Instead, you now have a chance to find the Nameless Seer lurking in T16 or T17 maps, so it can just spawn there. The Nameless Seer can offer to scry a map, and you can move div cards to drop in different maps. A big shuffle of which divination cards can be found in each map, which means most maps drop fewer divination cards than before. But don't worry, you can now see this information for yourself, because when hovering over or selecting a map on your atlas, it now displays which divination cards can drop there. You can also type the name of a divination card into the highlight filter on the atlas to display maps that drop a certain card. A new fragment, an audience with the king. Let you go fight the King in the Mists, and he'll drop a number of uniques that were familiar from that league, but that which was taken, I think, is still called that which was taken, but instead drops in the form of the Parandus Pact, which was from Necropolis League. In maps tier 16 and above, you now have a chance to discover a reflective mist from Kalandra. They talked about that in the reveal. You can come across sentinels near the start of T16 and 17 maps. They work in a similar fashion, though they aren't items. Click on them and they can be activated in that area anytime. So it looks like there's something that drops in the map, like at the beginning of it, and you can choose to use it. However, it's not something that you have any kind of management for, or the Sentinel board thing to give them buffs or anything. Scarabs, Chisels, and Horizon Orbs now follow the same drop rules as maps, as they are consumed proportionally to in-game maps. They do not drop more with additional party members present, nor do they scale with bonuses to item quantity on the player. The intention is to keep the number of these items dropping always proportional to the number of maps items dropping. Fair enough. Monsters killed from all leagues and additional content can now drop maps. Previously, most of the monsters were prevented from dropping maps, except for bosses or elite monsters. Now all of them can, but they have a map drop penalty. The penalty varies based on how many monsters the league adds and how long the league takes to complete or engage with on average. Scarab of Bisection allows you to select the nullify prefixes or nullify suffixes crafting options on the map device. The Horned Scarab of Awakening no longer provides these crafting options. I didn't know that existed. That could have been really useful in running the T17s. Scarab changes. I'm not going to read through the Scarab changes. This is all going to be visible in game. The Reliquary Scarab has been renamed to the Titanic Scarab. Doesn't give increased unique items found. It now provides unique monsters have 2% increased toughness, damage, rarity, and quantity of items dropped per 1% increased pack size on the area. Reliquary Scarab of Overlords now causes unique monsters in area to have 2 additional rewards and 30% increased toughness. Toughness. It's a new terminology. Then the Nameless Seer Scarab is gone. It gives unique monsters to have 2 additional monster mods. Up the amount of wisps from 1,000 to 2,000 from the Scarab of Wisps. A bunch of scarabs that are gone. The Shadowed Crow, Bestiary Scarab that's being worked into Bestiary League. They've reviewed the limit for how many of each scarab can be used alongside a map and made adjustments where necessary, because we can get up to 6 maps device slots now. After socketing your first Voidstone on the Atlas, you can now hover over T14 and higher maps and view what T17 map can drop there. Cool. T17s are just better. You can use chisels on T17s, so they drop with random quality instead of the 20% they were dropping with. Union of Souls map modifier can no longer roll on T17s. That mod sucked. The map mod that caused additional clusters of volatile barrels has been removed. In its place, we've added a new modifier that provides a chance for rare monsters to fracture on death. Alright, that's fair. I'm okay with that. Double anointed amulets can now drop in blight ravaged maps. It's cool. It'll be interesting to see how this works. If you get a double anointed amulet, can you change one of the anoints on it? Or if you re-anoint it, does it go over both of them? This is interesting. Something really RNG to potentially chase out of Blight Ravaged maps. I like that. I actually like that. Monsters in Ultimatum can drop loot now. Hordes in Abyssal Depths now drop more items. Some of the beasts from Einhar's Memory of Harvest Beasts have been added to the core pool of bestiary monsters. You can now encounter the Black Morrigan as well. Janus's Fortification Safe House is now a chest of Domination Scarabs. You now have a chance to find a Gloom Shrine or Charge Shrine in areas. Ooh, that's big. Divine Shrines are now rarer and have a duration of 20 seconds instead of 45. That's fine. Just passively getting a Gloom or Charge Shrine in maps, huge. Increased drop rate of all those puzzle boxes, but added tier weighting to which one you get. Maps added Alleyways, Ancient City, Arachnid Tomb, Armory, Beach, Caldera, Carcass, Chateau, City Square, Colonnade, Coliseum, Coral Ruins, Coves, Crater, Dark Forest, Desert, Dig, Geode, Haunted Mansion, Infested Valley, Leyline, Lighthouse, Malformation, Marshes, Mesa, Racecourse, Ramparts, Relic Chambers, Scriptorium, Sepulchre, Spider Lair, and Summit. And the maps we are losing are Acid Caverns, Arachnid Nest, Arena, Arid Lake, Arsenal, Barrows, Canyon, Conservatory, Crimson Temple, Excavation, Forking River, Frozen Cabins, Grave Trough, Iceberg, Lava Chambers. It's out! Bye-bye Lava Chamber. Haha! Mineral Pools, Park, Phantasmagoria, Plaza, Primordial Pool, Reef, Shipyard, Shrine, Stagnation, Sunken City, Thicket, Tower, Volcano, Wasteland, Waste Pool, Waterways, and Wharf. So it seems like a bigger chunk of maps coming in and going out this time. And then the map tiers have been shuffled. Pantheon bosses have been changed as a result. Crafting recipes moved around. Good. Simulacrum starts at wave 15. Ritual. Corpses that you can use to raise as specters can now be found as a ritual reward. These corpses have been rebalanced to be appropriate for the core game compared to their debut in Affliction League. The lowest tier ritual bases cannot be found in maps, and the highest tier can only be found in maps with an area level of 83 or higher. Ooh, gonna be much harder to get a Blizzard Crown then. Gotta be in T16s to get the Blizzard Crown. So it's not just like a easy farm ritual, get Blizzard Crown and you're OP. Nope. Archdemon Crown changed to have -2 to support gems, +2 of socketed skill gems. Brimstone Treads changed and reduces your stun threshold but gives stun and block recovery. Debilitation Gauntlets have been renamed. Implicit is now a chance to block and you take 10% damage from blocked hits, replacing the exerted attacks and Warcry. And they buffed the numbers on the cooldown recovery of movement skills on Dream Quest Slippers. Sinistral Gloves have been renamed to Trap Setter Gloves. They're no longer reduced attack damage with main hand, increased with offhand. Instead, they now provide 30% reduced cooldown recovery rate for throwing traps and cause traps skills to have 20 to 25% increased skill effect duration. It makes the cooldown longer on the traps, but gives you duration. Penitent Mask is now +4 max chaos res instead of 2 to 3 max fortification. Ooh, that's interesting too. Atlas passive tree changes. Back to the basics is gone. Unending Nightmare Keystone now has Delirium in your maps, has doubled difficulty scaling with distance from the mirror. Interesting. They nerfed Pact with Energy, so it's not just permanent now. It's a 60-second buff that gives 35% damage, 15 movement speed, +1 max res. So you can't use that like I was in T17s to like raise your max res to make the bosses doable. But they've changed those, so they're not as crazy. No longer 30% more quantum items dropped by possessed monsters. Instead, tormented spirits are more likely to be less common varieties. RIP. Minor change to a betrayal rarity from syndicate members thing. Another nerf to the quant of items dropped by possessed or touched monsters. Small passives for incursions have increased pack size instead of quant. No longer quant on passives leading up to the different Beyond Demons. They're chances for the enemies to be those types. Unique monsters slain at ritual altars in your maps grant 100% more tribute. That's cool. It says it now has, so it might have been added to an existing thing. Blight towers in your maps can be salvaged after the blight encounter. Higher tier towers grant better salvaged rewards, and salvage rewards are improved for each different tower type built during encounter. Interesting. Okay, distilled fungus is now fungal horizons. Big increased chance for blighted maps. 20% chance for chests to be openable again instead of more chance for blighted maps, because that's now here. No longer chance for oil extractors. Instead, it now provides blight bosses in your maps have 10% chance to add an additional reward chest when defeated, and one lane of blight encounters in your maps is guarded by only blight bosses. Interesting. Monster increased item rarity and quantity. The way that the quantity and rarity of items dropped from the extra content has been changed. Generally, we have added item quant or rarity bonuses to a number of mechanics such as essences or delirium. On top of that, we have added drops back to some leagues where it wasn't present before, like Ultimatum. In general, the philosophy here is that if you're killing monsters, you get loot, and if they are more difficult, you should get more and better loot. A major change we have made alongside the above is that we have changed a lot of the quantity and rarity bonuses on monsters to prevent things multiplying out of control at the very top end. There were cases that were utilized by fewer than 100 players total in a league, and they were able to yield tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of unique items dropping in every map, while not even playing in a party, and as such had monopoly on the unique item market. If you are wondering why many T0 uniques reduced so drastically in value during Necropolis League, it was due to this. This wasn't them exploiting a game mechanic, this was just the maximum capacity of rewards. By us changing this, it severely limits the runaway cases without affecting the experience of average users, or even above average users at all. It is very much still intended that you can push the rewards and difficulty of content to it feeling excessive without having to sacrifice the integrity of the league's economy at the same time. Player increased item quantity. Item quantity bonuses on all character items have been removed, though this will not affect existing items in standard leagues. Magic Find is intended to be another axis on which your gear can scale once you have achieved the power you want. With item quantity being only available on unique items, this meant that if you wanted to get the most out of it, you had to be playing a very specific build. We still want people to be able to invest into Magic Find, but now only through item rarity. This can be obtained on a number of rare item slots and by a much larger number of builds. Bisco's Collar Unique Amulet has been temporarily disabled. The Ascetic can no longer be obtained. Sedima's Touch now gives rarity instead of quant, as with Perandus Blazon. Bisco's Leash Belt now has 10 to 15 all attributes instead of the quant. Divination Distillate gives rarity instead of quant, now gives 10 to elemental resistances instead of 50. Thief's Torment has rarity instead of quant. Centauri's Answer no longer has quant. Gold Worms have rarity instead of quant. Breed's Embrace has rarity instead of quant, has a fixed 100% rarity. The Pariah has 60% increased rarity per white socket. Venter's Gamble can now roll minus 15 to 15% increased mana reservation efficiency of skills. That is insane, but no more quant. Windripper no longer has quant, instead it has rarity. Spine-Fused Talisman implicit modifier now gives dot multi instead of quant, and this also affects Eyes of the Great Wolf. 12 to 18 dot multis, pretty nuts. Interesting. So you can now go into Betrayal and try and make... No, it's not there anymore, is it? That's a bestiary craft to make a talisman implicit, so you won't be able to choose a tier 3 talisman, but you could fish for this dot multi. No longer item quant from corruption mods. Increased rarity of items can no longer roll on jewels, including an implicit modifier on synthesized jewels. The Discerning Taste Timeless Jewel Notable now grants 12% 40% mana reservation efficiency instead of 40% rarity. Player balance. Corpses spawned by the Desecrate and Corpse Walk skills now have a flat 15% chance to match your specters rather than a 15% chance on top of being added to the main pool of corpse varieties that can be picked from. These spectral corpses are now unusable for most purposes and can only be used by the minion skills such as Raise Spectre or Bone Offering. So what it seems like is happening here is that this change means that when you are using Desecrate, you are not going to be able to detonate spectral corpses. So having the perfect specters for your Detonate Dead build no longer matters. So I think this is a big nerf to Detonate Dead. Player spawned corpses are no longer affected by modifiers on maps. Endurance charge change to give elemental damage reduction instead of additional resistances. Ward is now instantly restored after 2 seconds instead of 4, which is cool. Dual wielding gives more block than it used to. Player minions are no longer targetable by enemies while the player has the grace period buff. An example here. These enemies are targeting my minions and I have this grace period buff where I can't be damaged. The change is making it so this no longer happens. Like, my minions aren't able to attack or anything. I move, and then, yeah, they can attack. But it's going to prevent the enemies from just attacking the minions, which is a cool change. You can no longer be stunned while performing a Vaal skill before the contact point has been reached. Okay, so, you can't be stunned out of using a Vaal skill, I guess. You cannot be stunned while performing the spell animation of Vaal Smite, and you cannot be stunned while performing Vaal Breach. Okay, oh, here we go. Skill gem changes. The Divine Blessing support has been removed. Oh? And existing versions of this item will be deleted upon logging in after the launch of the League. Forbidden Shaco items will have the support replaced with Rupture, while existing Hungry Loops will be replaced with Eternal Blessing. March of the Legion is unaffected by these changes and is now the sole source of this support. Okay, it's gonna be in a lot of builds now for an extra aura. Following skills no longer have a physical tag. Blade Flurry, Cleave, Cyclone, Lancing Steel, Perforate, Shrapnel Ballista, Split Arrow, Sweep. Okay. Multi-Strike now displays that it cannot support travel skills rather than every travel skill stating that it cannot be supported by multi-strike. They also now describe that they cannot support retaliation skills. Some attack skills that can be used ranged or melee have had their weapon requirements split between the base gem and their transfigured gem, such as the Frenzy skill gem now requires a bow or wand, while Frenzy of Onslaught requires a melee weapon or unarmed. Elemental Hit now requires a melee weapon, while Elemental Hit of the Spectrum still requires a bow or wand. Puncture now requires a bow, while the new Puncture of Shanking requires dagger, claw, or sword. The elemental arrows fired from prismatic blink or mirror arrow clones now correctly use skill damage conversion, 100% fire, cold, or lightning. This means that with other sources of non-skill conversion such as Unholy Might, the elemental arrows deal entirely 100% elemental damage instead of 50% plus 50% chaos, assuming using a physical bow and no other sources of flat added damage. Makes sense? The elemental arrows fired from prismatic blink or mirror arrow clones now only deal damage of the chosen element, similar to elemental hit. That's probably a nerf to a Bama build, maybe? Absolution. Damage effectiveness scales as it levels instead of fixed. Same with the transfigured one. Ancestral Cry no longer grants a buff that gives armor and melee range. Instead, it grants elemental resistances, Purified Power, and max all res. Oh, per 10 power, and can count a maximum of 30 power, and has a lower duration. But I guess still works for strike skills. Armageddon Brand, effectiveness scaling as gem levels. Transfigured Gems, effectiveness scaling. We're probably going to see this a bunch. So effectiveness scaling means it used to have a fixed effectiveness, now it scales from an effectiveness to a higher effectiveness. Artillery Ballista mana cost being raised on all versions. Bane damage buff, same for Bane of Condemnation. Decrease in mana cost of Barrage and Barrage of Volley Fire. Battle Mage's Cry no longer grants a buff which boosts critical strike chance and allows attacks to benefit from increases to spell damage. Instead, the user and nearby allies gain a buff that boosts critical strike chance. The buff grants plus 0.5 to crit chance per 5 power and can count a maximum power of 25 and has reduced duration. So that's a big base crit buff, potentially. Berserk now gives rage effect and no longer increases the size of your character. Everything else it used to do is gone. Blade Flurry no longer has added attack physical damage at all gym levels. It now has a higher effectiveness of added damage at all levels and higher mana cost. Same for Blade Flurry of Incision. Blade Storm has increased mana cost, higher effectiveness of added damage. Blade Storm of Uncertainty now has a higher mana cost and higher effectiveness of added damage. Going way higher. 347 at top end from 180. That's insane. I mean, it's almost doubled for the base gym too. 291 from 150. It's a lot. Blast Rain, cheaper at low levels, same at the top end. Blight, damage buffs at all levels, same for transfigured versions. Bone Nova, granted by Olnatol's Embrace. Effectiveness of added damage went up. Bone Shatter, big mana cost increase. It was previously 5 at all gym levels. That's ridiculous. It was almost double at level 1 on the mana cost. No longer gains melee strike range, and the effectiveness here probably isn't going up as much. Bone Shatter of Carnage now has much higher effectiveness. Bone Shatter of Complex Trauma has a cap of 200% more damage per trauma. Burning Arrow no longer has added fire damage to attacks against ignited enemies at all gym levels, and the effectiveness of damage went up. Mana cost also went up. So that's a buff to the Burning Arrow build that I played in Affliction League. You get better scaling off all the flat damage you get. Okay, that's good. Burning Arrow of Vigor, mana cost increase, it's still bad. Call to Arms has been renamed to Auto Exertion. It now reserves 15% mana per supported Warcry to cause those Warcries to be repeatedly triggered. Can now support multiple Warcries and no longer causes Warcries to share cooldowns. It now gives increased cooldown recovery rate instead of reduced. It now has supported Warcries do not grant buffs or charges to you or allies. It also now cannot support Retaliation Skills and gives more cooldown. So this is for exerts and not for buffs. The buffs that affect you and nearby allies you don't get by using this, but you do get to use the Warcries continuously to give you the exerts. Caustic Arrow of Poison no longer has added chaos damage at all gym levels and now has increased effectiveness of damage. It looks like they're going through and removing all that flat added damage on gyms. Now you're forced into the added chaos thing for this again. This flat chaos damage made this viable. It's what gave it a possibility of being used. So I'm unsure what to think about this. I never played around with it myself, but I know a lot of people were playing Caustic Arrow Poison, like totem things. So that's interesting change. Chain Hook, lower mana cost at gym level 1, scaling to its original. Instead, it grants 2 rage, effectiveness increased. Charge Dash, mana cost increase, effectiveness increase. Cleave no longer gives flat fizz, gives better effectiveness, over doubled at the top end. And the mana cost, 7 up to 13, previously 6 at all gym levels. Cleave of Rage has gain 2 rage on attack hit. And I think there's like a built-in rage cooldown that was mentioned above, that you can only gain rage every 0.5 seconds. So I think there is a limit to this. Or if your cleave hits 10 enemies, maybe you just gain 20 rage. I don't know. Cobra Lash doesn't have the flat chaos damage. Effectiveness increased. Mana cost lowered at low ends, 1 higher at level 20. Cold Snap is worse at the lower levels, same at the top end. Same for Cold Snap of Power. Consecrated Path, mana costs increase, effectiveness increase. Crackling Lance, effectiveness now scales instead of being base. Crackling Lance of Branching and Disintegration, scaling effectiveness. Creeping Frost has scaling effectiveness. Lower at the low end, but higher at the high end. Cyclone, no more flat fizz. Effectiveness is higher. Mana cost is higher. Defiance Banner is no longer a reservation skill and has none of its previous stats. You must gain Valor from melee combat to use this skill, which will consume all Valor to place a banner with an aura. The aura will be larger and more powerful the more Valor was consumed. The banner lasts for duration, but will end early if you leave the aura, or use the skill again while it's active. While you have no placed banner, you can gain Valor. Now it has a base duration of 10 seconds, and a base radius of 2.4 meters, provides more AoE and more aura effect per Valor consumed, which scales as the gem levels. Banner grants 8% increased movement speed, 8% spell suppression, also -5 damage taken from suppressed hits, which also scales up. Okay, so this is a nice spell suppression thing, but none of the armor, evasion, reduced damage taken from enemies stuff anymore. But if you have a lot of Valor, this can be a lot of spell suppression. Desecrate. The maximum level of corpses spawned is now level 20 at gem level 1, scaling up to 80 at gem level 20, previously 100. RIP. The flat armor you get from Determination has been changed, but they added new base types to get that armor back. Dominating Blow, mana cost lower at level 1, higher at level 20, and better effectiveness. Big number increase there. Same for Transfigured Version. Doriani's Touch now has a mana cost of 14. It also has 1,000 effectiveness of added damage instead of 600. Double Strike no longer has flat fizz. Effectiveness goes up. Mana cost goes up. Over double at gem level 20. Big effectiveness and mana cost increase on Double Strike of Impaling and of Momentum. Dread Banner now has a base duration of 10 seconds, 2.4 meters, gives more AoE and aura effect per Valor consumed. Banner grants 4% chance to block attack damage. Banner also causes you and allies to recover 9 life when blocking at gem level 1, scaling up to 34. So that's what you scale. The block chance and the life on block with Dread Banner. No more Impale stuff here. Dual Strike, mana cost increase almost triple at level 20. Big effectiveness. Not as much effectiveness out of the Ambidexterity, but also gets the mana cost increase. Earthquake, mana cost increase at the top end. Better effectiveness. Earthquake of Amplification. Same changes, but Aftershock now deals 5% more damage with ailments per 0.1 seconds duration. That's a nerf there, but the effectiveness went up. Earth Shatter, mana cost up, effectiveness up. Elemental Hit, mana cost decrease, damage increase by a lot, but this is now a melee only skill. And Elemental Hit of the Spectrum, mana cost lowered, but damage nerf here. Only at the top end. It's buffed on cold damage at level 1, but otherwise nerfed. No, fire's buffed, cold is buffed, lightning is nerfed at the top end. Alright, what's next? Enduring Cry no longer gives the life regen, or a buff which grants resistances and physical damage reduction based on endurance charges. Instead, the user and nearby allies gain a buff that grants life regeneration. The buff grants 2% of life regenerated per second per 5 power up to 25. Base duration is 2.5 seconds, scaling up to 3.4. Additionally, nearby allied players are now granted endurance charges as well as the user. Cool. Still gives endurance charges. Ensnaring Arrow now has a mana cost lowered at level 1 to unchanged. Ensnared enemies no longer always count as moving. Essence Drain does more damage at level 1. Way more damage, higher. And then the dot is higher and higher. Chaos dots have been increased across the board, it seems. Blight went up, Bane went up, and now Essence Drain's gone up. EK has effectiveness scaling. Explosive Arrow mana cost change at the low end, making it easier to use. Explosive Concoction now has more mana scaling. Has had damages buffed across the board there. Exsanguinate now has effectiveness scaling, as does Fireball, Firestorm, Flame Dash, Flamethrower Trap, Flesh and Stone being pretty much completely changed. Nearby enemies take up to 10% more physical damage from hits while in Blood Stance, up to 20%, and take up to 10% less damage from nearby enemies while in Sand Stance. That scales up to 19%. Probably 20 at gem level 21. These effects are strongest on enemies closest to you and scales down based on distance. Flicker Strike, mana cost decrease with big effectiveness increase. Interesting. Freeze Pulse, effectiveness scaling. Frenzy has mana scaling as it levels. Frenzy of Onslaught now has better effectiveness because it's melee only. Frostblades doesn't give the flat cold. Now has mana scaling and a lot more effectiveness. Frostblades of Catabasis mana cost goes up as the gem levels. Frost Bomb effectiveness scaling. So a lot of these, like a Frost Bomb, it's if you're getting extra like added spell damage, it's not going to be as impactful at lower levels, but it'll be at the same at the top end on a lot of these spell changes. Same with Frost Blink. Frost Bolt has effectiveness scaling and a quality change to give increased cold damage rather than more damage on projectiles that are pierced. Frozen Legion has had slight effectiveness increase. Not much change there. Galvanic Arrow no longer has added lightning damage. Effectiveness increase to compensate. Same with the transfigured ones. Galvanic Field effectiveness scaling. General's Cry. Supported skill deals 60% less damage at gem level 1, scaling to 51%. So that got nerfed. Glacial Cascade, effectiveness scaling. Glacial Hammer, no more flat cold against chilled enemies. Big effectiveness increase. And mana cost is 6 at level 1 up to 10. So it was 5 at all gem levels. No longer has increased melee strike range, and it says this is a buff. Huh, okay. Grace has had the flat evasion nerfed, but new base types all the same. Ground Slam, mana cost, scaling, more effectiveness. Hatred no longer causes you and nearby allies to deal more cold damage. Now it gives more Fizz is extra cold though. Okay, so that's a big nerf to cold dot builds and a big buff to Fizz's extra builds. Huh, I don't know how to feel about that. Cold Dot's kind of been dead as well a bit with the changes to the Vortex, giving it cast time as well. Heavy Strike, mana cost increasing, doesn't have the melee strike range or knocks enemies back. Big effectiveness upgrade. Herald of Ash no longer gives more spell fire damage. That's a big change. Gives Fizz as extra fire, scaling up to 20. So it scales up the Fizz's extra there. Hex Blast has effectiveness scaling. Hydra Sphere effectiveness scaling. Ice Crash, mana cost increase, effectiveness increase. Ice Nova effectiveness scaling. Ice Shot, no more flat cold, but effectiveness up to compensate. Ice Trap has effectiveness scaling. Icicle Burst from Chimeria's Avarice has effectiveness increase. Infernal Blow, no more flat fire. Effectiveness increase. Mana cost increase. Infernal Cry no longer covers enemies in ash. That was really good. The user and nearby allies now gain a buff that grants a portion of their physical damage as extra fire. 5% Fizz's extra fire per 5 power up to 25. Mana cost decrease. The duration decreased. Combust effectiveness goes up as well. Intimidating Cry no longer has a buff that lowers the effect of enemy physical damage reduction. User and nearby allies now gain a buff that grants movement speed. Movement speed per 5 power, counting up to 30, and has a duration. Huh, okay. Kinetic Blast, big mana cost reduction. Attack speed buff. It also now has increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attack damage at 200% their value. What? Kinetic Blast? Out of nowhere, just like, here's a big buff. Kinetic Bolt, mana cost reduction. Effectiveness increase. Okay, cool. Lacerate, no more flat fizz. Increased effectiveness, increased mana cost. Lancing Steel, no more flat fizz. Effectiveness increased, mana increase. Leap Slam is the lower mana cost at level 1. It scales up to its original value. Effectiveness increase. Lightning arrow, no more flat lightning. Effectiveness increase. Mana cost decrease. So it seems like they kind of did, I don't know about spells, mana cost stuff, but all the attack stuff, they kind of did a mana cost sweep across everything, it seems. Lightning Spire Trap, effectiveness scaling. Okay, so this would be a buff for a level 21 gym, for example, that you didn't have before. Because if this gains an effectiveness per level, like this will go up to 101 at level 21, and you get more out of it actually, that there's scaling there rather than being fixed. So this is actually a buff for higher gym levels on all these spells that are getting this effectiveness scaling. Lightning Strike, no more added lightning, effectiveness is higher, mana cost went up at the top end. Lightning Tendrils, effectiveness scaling. Molten Burst, effectiveness is higher. Molten Shell is now a level 16 skill, and now is better at low levels with the armor. Unchanged at gym level 20. Molten Strike, no more flat fizz. Effectiveness is higher. Mana cost is higher. And then the melee strike range change. It's not there anymore. No more melee strike range. Orb of Storms, effectiveness scaling, as well as Penance Brand, Perforate, no more flat, big effectiveness. Pestilent Strike, no flat chaos, mana cost increase. Poisonous Concoction, cheaper to use at lower levels, damage increase. Same with the bouncing. Okay, Poisonous Concoction got buffed. Interesting. Power Siphon, mana cost lowered, spell damage applies to attack damage. Puncture, no longer flat fizz. Yep, same things. Purifying Flame, effectiveness scaling. Rage Vortex, effectiveness went up slightly. Rage Storm now deals 10% more damage per one rage sacrificed at all gem levels, previously 5. So if you can gain rage much faster now, I guess. They didn't buff these numbers a lot, so I'm hoping through testing they've discovered that Rage Vortex is still really strong with the rage stuff they introduced. Rain of Arrows, less mana cost. Raised Spectre of Transience can no longer use spectral corpses. So you have to use normal corpses from regular monsters, so you can't bypass the effect of the transfigured gem. Seems fair enough. Rallying Cry, buff now grants added attack damage equal to 3% of the damage of your main hand weapon per 5 power up to 30. So this is up to 18% of the damage of your main hand weapon. That seems like a top-end nerf there, and a duration nerf just like the others. Reap has effectiveness scaling. Reeve mana cost goes up. Effectiveness over doubled. So my Reeve build, I'll have to think about how the mana cost changed there before the build guide. But otherwise, that's only a buff. It's not losing flat damage that it was gaining as it leveled. The only thing it's losing is a mana cost. So otherwise, this gem is just the same. Rolling Magma, effectiveness scaling. Scourge Arrow doesn't have flat chaos. It's better scaling. Seismic Cry no longer grants a buff, which makes it easier for you to stun enemies. Now gains a buff that increases their armor and stun threshold. Buff grants 5% more armor per 5 power and 15% stun threshold per 5 power up to 25. So that's a lot of armor buff there. Exerted attacks now have 50% more AoE, previously 30% increased. Now it does more area effect. Duration changes, and 6 exerts instead of 4. Seismic Trap of Swells, effectiveness scaling. Shattering Steel, same as the other melee changes. Shrapnel Ballista, no more flat fizz, but scaling. Mana cost goes up on Shrapnel Ballista. Shield Charge, mana cost decrease at low levels. Can be used at level 4 instead of 10. So you might get shield charge as a movement skill earlier on. Interesting, I like that change. Damage of shield charge lowered at the gem level 1, higher at gem level 20, and better scaling from the armor evasion on shield. Shield Crush, mana cost increase, better scaling from the shield as well. Shock Nova, effectiveness scaling. Siege Ballista, mana cost increase. Smite, mana cost increase, effectiveness increase. Snipe, mana cost up to 6 at gem level 20 from 5. Spectral Helix, mana cost lowered at gem level 1. Effectiveness increase. Spectral Shield Throw, damage increases as well as on the shield. Spectral Throw, mana cost increase at level 20 and better effectiveness. Split Arrow, no flat fizz, better effectiveness, mana cost less. Splitting Steel, no more flat fizz, effectiveness scaling, mana cost up. Static Strike, mana cost goes up, effectiveness goes up. Storm Call, effectiveness scaling. Storm Rain, mana cost lower. Storm Blast Mine, effectiveness scaling, even though it's not much. Sunder, mana cost goes up, effectiveness like doubles. Sweep, no more flat fizz, effectiveness way up, mana cost goes up. Tectonic Slam, mana cost up, effectiveness up. Tornado, effectiveness scaling. Tornado Shot, mana cost down at level 1, up at level 20. Toxic Rain, mana cost lowered. No more flat chaos on Toxic Rain of Spore Burst. It's better damage effectiveness. It was this flat chaos that was making these skills playable, from my understanding. Unearthed, corpses are level 10 at gem level 1 from 12, scaling up to 70 at level 20 from 80. It's going to be harder to get these high level corpses. Venom Gyre, mana cost increase at the top end. Vigilant Strike, mana cost increase, effectiveness increase, and no longer has melee strike range increase, which is supposedly a buff. Viper Strike, no more flat chaos, effectiveness way up, mana cost going up to double. Void Sphere, effectiveness scaling. Volcanic Fissure, mana cost up, effectiveness up. Voltaxic Burst and Vortex have effectiveness scaling. Whoa, wait a minute. Is this a typo? Or did they nerf Vortex like ridiculously hard? Because it says previously 270 at all gym levels, and now it scales from 130 to 170? And the same values are used here for Vortex of Projection. No one was playing Vortex before this, they won't be playing it afterwards. Okay. Vulnerability Quality now provides attack hits against cursed enemies have 0 to 10% chance to aggravate bleeding, which causes them to take damage as if they're moving. War Banner, completely changed skill. Banner grants 8% increased accuracy rating to you and allies, 4% more physical damage with melee skills. And those are scalable through the aura effect from the Valor consumed. Warlord's Mark no longer has the rage regeneration. It now has cursed enemies grant 10 rage when stunned. Okay. Wave of Conviction, effectiveness scaling. Whirling Blades, mana cost reduction. Effectiveness goes up. Wild Strike, mana cost up, effectiveness up. Okay. Vaal skill balance then? A lot of the same thing. I've kind of the big theme here. Mana cost up on melee. Mana cost down for bows. Flat damage on attacks is gone. Effectiveness went way up to compensate. Lots of spells have effectiveness of added damage scaling. And then chaos dot skills got buffed. And that probably covers every single bit of every one of these changes that are here. Oh, and wand skills got the spell damage applies to attacks. I wonder if the mastery changed there. Because there's a wand mastery. Increases and reductions of spell damage also apply to attacks wielding a wand. Like, is that going away? Because if all the wand skills are getting this effect, like spell damage applies to attacks, I don't know why that mastery would need to exist anymore. But almost every single one of these has had the effectiveness increased, or for spells, effectiveness scaling added. And then the lone exception is Vaal Blight does more damage, because Chaos Dot skills got buffed. Support gem balance. Chance to Bleed can now support skills that create minions. No longer gives additional flat fizz. Deals more damage with bleed at gem level 1 up to 29. So that's a buff there. Decay buffed. It now gets bigger numbers. Earthbreaker used to give less damage at gem level 1. Now it doesn't, and gives more damage at gem level 20, which previously removed the less damage, but now it's only accessible through unique boots. and no longer gives the extra AoE. Fist of War no longer has ancestrally boosted slams deal more damage with ailments. Instead, the ancestrally boosted slams deal more damage with hits. Now also applies to ailments at the same value. So it no longer explicitly says more damage with ailments, but now more damage with hits here also applies to ailments at the same value. Okay. Impending Doom has effectiveness scaling. Increased duration has been renamed to more duration. You guessed it. It now grants supported skills more duration. 30% more, 39% previously increased. Quality gives more. All right. Infused Channeling no longer has the duration tag. Is now an int dex support gem. It now requires 70 int. Yeah. No longer has infusion lasts 6 seconds after you finish channeling. Gain infusion after channeling, or infusion grants more damage of types matching supported gems tags. It now has, while channeling a supported skill, take 8% less damage from hits, previously matching the skill gems tags. And it gives a better damage bonus there. Quality gives another less damage there. So you used to be able to channel a Scorching Ray, and with infused channeling, you would get a buff to all fire skills from having done so that could cause your Flame Blast to do more damage. That's not a thing anymore. Now it just has you take less damage from hits while channeling. I think they remove the more fun part of that with the infusion, but okay. Inspiration now causes supported skills to have less mana cost instead of reduced, so that stacks with any reduced mana cost stuff you have. Interesting. Prismatic Burst, effectiveness scaling. Rage no longer causes supported attacks to deal increased physical damage per 10 rage, or additional physical damage with at least 10 rage, or to gain rage. It now has gain 3 rage on attack hit at all gym levels, and causes supported skills to have increased attack speed while you have at least 10 rage at gym level 1 up to 19. Okay, sure. So it feels like the rage support gym is going to be used till you get the passives on the tree, kind of like fortified gym. Shockwave has effectiveness way up. Trauma been nerfed, actually. Less damage per trauma. Urgent Orders no longer has the plus 2 seconds to cooldown, and now has a cost and reservation multiplier of 200%. That is a skill gem that causes your war cries to use faster, and used to have a plus 2 to cooldown. No longer has that, so you can just use your war cries faster, but at a mana cost. Ascendancy changes. Still got more. Oh my god. I've been reading patch notes for 2 hours. The Crave the Slaughter Ascendancy passive skill no longer gives plus max rage. Instead, it now provides every rage also grants 1% increased attack speed, and inherent rage loss starts 2 seconds later. Small passive prior now gives 1 rage on melee hit instead of attack speed. Rite of Ruin now gives 50% increased rage effect, and an additional rage on melee hit. Does not have the cannot be stunned while you have at least 25 rage. Warbringer no longer provides war cries grant 10 rage per 5 power, or the sacrifice, or the exerts. It now provides war cries exert twice as many attacks. And small Berserker Ascendancy passives that gave 6% attack speed now provide 5. Okay, interesting. Chieftain, the Talhoa Force Strength Ascendancy skill passive has been removed. This can no longer roll on Forbidden Jewels. Arohangri Moon's Presence Ascendancy has been replaced with the new Sion's Sun's Roar Ascendancy, which provides war cries have infinite power and 30% increased buff effect. That's really strong. Small Node Prior gives increased duration instead of placement speed of totems. Chukuhama War's Herald now requires Sun's Roar or Heinekora Death's Fury. So Talhoa Force Strength is gone. And then Arohangri Moon's Presence been changed, and now you can get to Tukuhama War's Herald through this new one or this new one, or Heinekora Death's Fury. So it's this node. Enemies you or your totem skill have a chance to explode, and then the new one here. Now connect to an additional one to get this, but all this is gone. You got that? Good. All right, next. Juggernaut. The Unrelenting Ascendancy passive skill no longer provides plus 4 to Chaos Res per endurance charge, or reduced LE damage taken at max endurance charges. It now gives 1% elemental damage reduction per endurance charge. Nifty. The Unbreakable Ascendancy passive no longer has 8% of armor applies to Fire Cold Lightning taken from hits. Okay, that was the big part of making these builds work. It now has 15% of armor also applies to chaos damage taken from hits. You still get the double body armor, but Unbreakable was so good. And then the 6% attack speed's being turned into 5% attack speed there. Champion, Unstoppable Hero, and Fortitude have swapped spots. Unstoppable Hero no longer grants anything that it granted. It now provides nearby allies count as having fortification equal to yours. And you only get 15 fortification instead of 20. The Inspirational Ascendancy now grants when you leave your banner's area, recover 30% of the valor consumed for that banner. Okay. Gladiator Ascendancy has been completely rebalanced. War of Attrition causes you to deal 1% more damage with hits and ailments to rare and unique enemies for each second they've been in your presence up to 100%. So if you're in the fight for 1 minute and 40 seconds, you do double damage. That's interesting. The Determined Survivor Ascendancy passive causes you to gain 50% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value, and causes inherent bonuses from dual wielding to be doubled. So this means you don't get as much block from shields, but you get 20% extra block while dual wielding. This is like a dual wield thing from what I read. Not something that causes you to gain more block from shield. It actually seems like less block from shield. More Than Skill Ascendancy causes your chance to block attack or spell damage to be lucky if you've blocked recently. Requires Determined Survivor. Okay. Measured Retaliation provides retaliation skills can be used for an additional 2 seconds and 50% chance for retaliation skills to remain usable after use. Okay. Gratuitous Violence causes bleeding enemies you kill to explode. Jagged Technique causes bleeding you inflict to be aggravated. Requires Gratuitous Violence. Attacks have 15% chance to cause bleeding on the small passives, and bleeding which has been aggravated always deals higher damage as though the target was moving. Weapons Master provides 25% more accuracy rating while wielding a sword, 20% more AoE with Mace or Scepter, 20% more crit chance with Dagger, 20% of Leech's Instant while wielding a Claw, 30% more damage with hits and ailments against enemies that are on low life while you're wielding an axe. Or all of it if you're using Varnastra, as was mentioned in the live stream. And then the smaller passives have been nerfed a little bit from 15 to 10% damage. Deadeye, Rupturing Ascendancy has been removed and replaced with Avidity. This new passive provides 5% more accuracy per frenzy charge, +1 max frenzy charges, and gain a frenzy charge each second while moving. Gathering Wind slightly nerfed, 10% effective tailwind instead of 15. Wind Ward has been buffed, provides 4% less damage taken per gale force from 3. The Far Shot Ascendancy no longer provides Far Shot, and now instead provides projectiles gain damage as they travel further, dealing up to 30% more damage to targets. Warden. The Warden has replaced the Raider. Bye-bye to my favorite Ascendancy class. The Oath of Spring Ascendancy causes shocks from your hits to decrease damage taken by 2% and provides you can apply up to 50 shocks to each enemy. Well, that's nifty. I didn't catch that one. Oath of Winter causes enemies you freeze to remain frozen for at least 2 seconds and causes freezing hits that do not freeze to apply Hoarfrost. Hoarfrost increases freeze duration on enemies by 20% per stack. Freezing an enemy removes all stacks of Hoarfrost on them. Hoarfrost lasts 10 seconds and refreshes the duration of existing Hoarfrost. Nifty. The Oath of Summer provides if you would ignite an enemy, you scorch them instead. And you can apply an additional scorch to each enemy. Well, that's kind of cool as well. The Avatar of the Wilds grants level 20 Unbound Avatar skill. Gain 1 Unbound Fury when you inflict an elemental ailment with a hit on an enemy, no more than once every 0.2 seconds for each type of ailment, and cannot gain Unbound Fury while unbound. It also provides your hits always inflict freeze, shock, and ignite while unbound, and 80% more elemental damage while unbound. Requires Oath of Spring, Oath of Winter, or Oath of Summer. Okay. The Enduring Suffusion Ascendancy Causes tincture effects to linger on you for 0.5 seconds per mana burn on you when the tincture was deactivated, up to 6 seconds. It also causes tinctures applied to you to have 30% less mana burn rate. Not bad. Experienced Herbalist allows you to have an additional tincture active. Seasoned Hunter causes tincture effects to also apply to ranged weapon attacks. Nifty. Mother's Teachings gives level 20 bark skin. And the Lesson of the Seasons Ascendancy provides minus 15 to fire, cold, and lightning damage taken from spell hits per bark. Prevent plus 2% suppressed spell damage per bark below maximum. And lose 1 bark when hit by an enemy spell. Woof, woof, woof. The small passives prior provides 5% spell suppression. Alright. Ascendant changes to those nodes. You don't get to gain rage, but you get the 1 second later from Berserker. Chieftain no longer gets totems. Taunt enemies now gives Warcry buff effect. Deadeye no longer gets projectiles gain damage as they travel further. Instead, gain a frenzy charge every 3 seconds while moving. Gladiator Ascendancy provides 25% chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with attacks. Gain 50% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of shield's value. Inherent bonuses from dual wielding are doubled. And deal 1% more damage with hits and ailments to rare and unique enemies for every 2 seconds they've been in your presence, up to 50%. So this forces you into dual wield. Am I reading this wrong? Gain 50% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. So it gives you less block from shields, but doubles the effects of dual wielding. Raider Ascendancy is now Warden. No more movement speed. Chance for frenzy charges. All of it's gone. Instead, it now causes attack damage to penetrate 8% Ellie res and provides you can have an additional tincture. Why would you give the Scion Ellie pin when the Warden doesn't get Ellie pin? Like, am I crazy? Because I feel like it should have some kind of relation to the Warden, and this wasn't anywhere there. Passive skill tree changes. There are now more notable on the passive skill tree than there are oil combinations to anoint them all. Really? After the indigo oil too? They added the indigo oil for that, I thought. As a result of this, notable passive skills that provided plus 30 to an attribute can no longer be anointed. That was one of the coolest, cheap anoints you could get. Okay. Vaal Pact now makes Leech instant, and you cannot recover life other than from Leech. I assume that means you can't use life flasks, but I was also told that in 1.1, they changed this so that flasks would still work. So, I don't know. It's a long time ago since we've had this Vaal Pact. The Impaler Keystone passive skill now provides inflict 5 additional impales on enemies you impale, previously 4, and for 5 seconds after you impale enemies, they cannot be impaled again, and impales cannot be called from them, previously 4 seconds. Okay. Versatile Combatant is buffed, and it swapped positions with Iron Reflexes, and that you now only lose 10% max chance to block from 25, so that might be good now. Dual wield block might be a real thing. The Warlord's Call Keystone skill is once again known as Call to Arms. No longer provides Warcries, no longer exert attacks. It now provides 100% more Warcry duration, and Warcries do not grant buffs or charges to you. So better Warcry duration, but a Warcry bot is potentially a thing with that, which is cool. Perfect Agony Keystone changed. It now causes damage over time multiplier for ailments to be equal to critical strike multiplier. Causes critical strikes to not deal extra damage and makes it so non-critical strikes cannot inflict ailments. That's different. That's a whole thought thing that's gonna be different. Added a new bleeding passive mastery that gives chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with exerted attacks. The Mountain provides 12% chance to block attack damage while dual wielding or holding a shield, and 3% chance to block attack damage. Wonder what's going to cost to anoint that one. As the Thunder provides increased Warcry duration and buff effect. There's an Impales last 1 additional hit on the tree now. Increased crit chance against bleeding enemies. And crit multi against bleeding enemies. Nifty. Feline Swiftness provides 10% chance to block damage while dual wielding. 8% movement speed while dual wielding. Cool. Another reservation efficiency location. Master of Wounds provides 12% dot multi for bleeding and reduced bleed duration on you. Nomadic Teachings cluster to the northwest of the Templar's starting location. Nomadic Teachings provides +2 to all elemental resistances. I imagine this is max all res. With this patch, we might have enough all res accessible that stacking resistances in life is an acceptable counter to having spell suppression, which would be cool. That'd be a really nice balance change, I think. The spell suppression is too good, but that it's not because it's not spell suppression's fault, it's because of the lacking ability to deal with spells through other means. Roaring Challenge provides 25% increased total power counted by war cries. Savage Skewering gives 15% impale effect. Spirit of War provides 0.5% physical damage leeches mana and reduced mana cost of attacks. Thrill of Battle causes you to gain 2 mana per enemy hit with attacks and reduced mana cost of attacks. Wall of Steel, 10% chance to block attack damage while dual wielding or holding a shield, and 300 armor if you blocked recently. 10%! 10%! Let's go. That's awesome. Love it. Wicked Blade now provides 30% increased damage with bleeding and 20% bleed duration. Wild Hunger provides 0.8% of attack damage leeches life and increased maximum recovery from leech. The attack passive mastery that caused nearby enemies to be intimidated while you have rage been replaced with one that causes attack skills to cost life instead of 20% of mana cost. Bleeding mastery, now a 50% chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you stun. Bleeding duration replaced with a mastery that causes attack hits to aggravate any bleeding on targets which is older than 4 seconds. The block passive mastery that provided 3% increased spell damage per 5% chance to block spell damage has been changed to provide 1% spell block per 5% chance to block attack damage. Yo, that's awesome. I like that one. And then the 3% attack damage per 5 block has been removed. Dual wielding, mastery that caused spell block instead of attack block now grants 20% instead of 15. That is the base dual wielding effect. Now you get 20% attack block instead of 15. That is because the dual wielding base stats now you get 20% attack block from that instead of 15. So this converts the attack block that you would get from dual wielding into spell block. So it's just giving 20 instead of 15 as well. The 10% of physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage, armor, and ES mastery has been replaced with reduced extra damage from crits. That's fair. 10% of armor that applies chaos damage from the armor ES mastery is now reduced to curses on you. That's kind of fitting there as well. The life passive mastery that causes skills to cost life instead of mana is now 15%. The life mastery of 50 life is now 30. The chance for hits to ignore enemy physical damage reduction has been increased from 40 to 50. Impale mastery that caused chance to overwhelm now causes it to ignore enemy physical damage reduction. Minion offense passive mastery that had 20% overwhelm now has 50% chance for minion hits to ignore. That's good. More chance to aggravate bleeds. Measured Fury cluster has been relocated. Rebalancing all the Warcry stuff. Completely changing Cannibalistic Rite. It now causes attack skills to cost life instead of 10% mana cost and reduced mana cost of attacks. Sanctuary notable passive now provides +1 all max res instead of 12 ele res while holding a shield. That's cool. And lowered the ele res while holding a shield on the entry node. And they buffed the small nodes up to 3% instead of 2, with both now providing 3 ele res while holding a shield instead of 6. That's fair. I feel like the ele res was easy enough to get without all the extra ele res on those nodes. So yeah, we're getting changes for chance to ignore physical damage reduction instead of overwhelm. It's kind of going away in a lot of places. Increased impale effect instead of overwhelm for impale. Forceful skewering now is 15% chance to impale instead of 25% overwhelm for impale. 8% attack and spell block while wielding a staff, previously 6. Additional staff block small passive has been added before it. Okay. Ribcage Crusher has been moved. Okay. Bone Breaker gives better AoE. Slaughter gives rage on hit with axes instead of max 5 rage. Lust for Carnage no longer provides increased recovery from leech. Gives better leech and better attack speed though. Command of Steel now gives 8% attack block and 50% defenses from equipped shield, previously 5 and 30% attack damage. The passives leading up to it now both grant 50% increased defenses from equipped shield. Okay, cool. Testudo now gives 10% attack block instead of 6. Blade Barrier gives 10% while dual wielding instead of 5. Good. They did the right thing. They're buffing block, they're buffing all res, and they left spell suppression alone. This is what needed to happen. Berserking gives plus 5 max rage instead of 10, but rage is better. No more slower loss of rage leading up to it though. 8% attack block chance while dual wielding instead of 5. Bloodletting chance to aggravate bleeds. Hematophagy now provides 40% maximum life recovery per second from leech. It's a big buff there, but no longer provides the fizz damage leech's life. You gotta get that elsewhere, I guess. Which is there's plenty of places to get fizz leech's life. Spirit Void has had the mana leech buffed. Okay, yeah, big buffs all across the board there. As well as Vitality Void. Just the numbers all went up. Cannibalistic Rite. Small passives. Grant reduced mana cost of attacks. And the notable passive provides reduced mana cost of attacks and attacks cost life instead of mana. I just read that above. Cannibalistic Rite? I feel like I read that. Taste for Blood gives better leech. Okay, yep, leech is better there. Dark Arts Cluster has been moved near Pain Attunement. Dark Arts now provides 8% attack and spell block chance while dual wielding instead of 5%. The Dark Arts is nodes right here that are dual wielding attack stuff. That's being moved over here by Pain Attunement and buffed. Enigmatic Reach notable passive now provides 8% spell block while wielding a staff and 25% chance to gain a power charge when you block spell damage, but no longer provides 10% increased attack and cast speed. It now has an additional path consisting of 2 passives which provide additional spell block while wielding a staff. Cool. Enigmatic Defense notable gives 8% attack and spell block, previously 6. Arcane Guarding now gives 10% spell block while holding a shield instead of 8. The Arcane Sanctuary cluster has been moved to the top of the Witch area. Arcane Sanctuary now gives 8% spell block chance while holding a shield, 25% spell damage while holding a shield, and 25% reduced. Okay, so those have been slightly nerfed. These are the nodes right here. Arcane Sanctuary, there's some spell block stuff here, but I guess it's giving spell block on Arcane Sanctuary now. And this is being moved to the top of the Witch area, so somewhere up in this region. Spine Cruncher now provides 100% increased stun duration against enemies on full life, previously 60, and gives better damage with maces and scepters than before. Aggressive Bastion increased its block up to 8%. This is the one that gives you endurance charges on kill while holding a shield. It's had the block there buffed. So if you're playing a block build and you need endurance charges, Aggressive Bastion's the way, rather than trying to get Disciple of the Unyielding. It's actually just a better node than Disciple of the Unyielding. Out here in Aggressive Bastion. Safeguard now gives 10% spell block while holding a staff or shield, previously 6. And now additionally grants +3 maximum spell block chance, but no longer the 8 to Elirez. Cool. Steelwood, stance notable, now provides 10% attack block chance while wielding a staff, up from 8. Deflection now provides 8 attack block with the shield up from 5. Chance for ignore PDR instead of overwhelm. More small passive things. Just small buffs in places here. 16. Was 15. Yeah. All right. The Adorned Unique Jewel. Unique item changes. The Adorned Unique Jewel now has 0 to 100 increased effect. Previously 50 to 150. Yikes. Dancing Dervish Unique is being changed. Defiance of Destinies receiving a sizable nerf. Elixir of the Unbroken Circle Unique Flask has 50 to 80% increased flask effect duration, so that's getting buffed. Eternal Damnation Unique Amulet now has cannot gain endurance charges and cannot gain power charges. Okay. Hand of the Fervent Unique Gloves now cause hits to have a chance to ignore physical damage reduction instead of overwhelm. Comb's Heart no longer has the fire damage, but once again 1,000 life instead of 500. Lethal Pride unique jewels that had Fizz taken as fire now give 1 rage on melee hit. Lycoside gives the flat cold to retaliation instead of counterattacks. No more level 15 vengeance on Martyr of Innocence. Night Grip unique gloves now have gain added chaos damage equal to 10% of ward, previously 20%. Alroth's Resolve now has 85% less ward during effect, nerfed from 70. Perfidy no longer has you can have two different banners at the same time. It now has having a placed banner does not prevent you from gaining Valor. Oh? This change affects existing versions of the item. Well, that's interesting. Replica Inn's Very Edge no longer has Fizz taken as Chaos. Sure. Rigwald's Command has Rage also grants 2% dot multi instead of 1, because Rage cap has been lowered. That seems appropriate. The Surrender no longer grants Reckoning skill. Existing versions of this unique will now grant Crushing Fist. The Taste of Hate no longer has 10 to 15 Fizz taken as cold. Instead, it now has 20 to 30% Fire and Lightning from hits taken as cold. The value of armor is increasing. Reckless Defense and Replica Reckless Defense now provide 2 to 6% block and spell block, previously 2 to 4. Okay, that's cool. Item changes. Item quality's been reworked. Yeah, we know about this. Quality bonuses are now multiplicative. The maximum quality from tainted armors and blacksmiths is now 20%. Non-gym items that generate with a random quality can now generate up to 30% quality. Does that mean that you could loot a 30% quality weapon or armor, but you cannot make one yourself? Is that what this is saying? So if an item drops on the ground with a random quality, it can now go up to 30? So you might need a tag in your loot filter to spot that one. Look for those 30% items that are dropping. Tainted armors and blacksmiths are now rared relative to other tainted currencies. Bestiary recipe to corrupt and equipment to have 30% quality now is for maps only. NPCs will no longer have items that can be purchased with quality currency items and no longer sell glass blowers baubles. Interesting. Rewards from League content that granted 30% quality equipment now instead gives 20% quality equipment. Apex Cleaver now ignores physical damage reduction instead of its additional quality. Cartographer's Chisel vendor recipe now only accepts a gavel base type rather than stone hammers and rock breakers. Sure. Cluster Jewel notable changes. Chance to ignore PDR instead of overwhelm. Unaffected by chill while channeling is a thing on a Cluster Jewel. The life mods on gear like scales up so much higher. The values provided by Essence of Greed when applied to body armor have been adjusted accordingly. That's good. The suffix modifiers on weapons that provided increased burning damage, increased damage with bleeding, and chance to cause bleed, or damage with poison, chance to poison can no longer roll. Okay, opened up suffixes a bit on weapons. Perfect Fossil has been renamed to Opulent Fossil and no longer grants improved quality. It now grants more drop modifiers and no tagless modifiers. More drop modifiers and no tagless modifiers. So a tagless modifier would be like reduced attribute requirements, increased stun and block recovery. I guess making no tagless modifiers is indicating that it can't roll those if you use a perfect or opulent fossil rather. I don't know, I don't understand what it means by more drop modifiers. That doesn't make sense. The incursion mod that provided spell damage and gain a percentage of non-chaos as extra chaos has been replaced with a mod that triggers a socketed spell on using a skill with 4-second cooldown with increased cost. Regular jewels can now roll suffix modifiers for max fire, cold, or lightning res. That's awesome. Many modifiers that granted physical damage taken as an element or chaos can no longer roll. This includes Incursion Temple and Delve modifiers on helmets, Corruption mods on shields, Fire Warbands mods on helmets. Fire Warbands, do these things still exist? And all Watcher's Eye modifiers. Ooh. This includes, it does not mention the Veiled Crafts. Essence of Horror on body armor gives reduced damage from crits per endurance charge instead of is taken as cold. Added a new set of modifiers for purity auras that can roll in Watcher's Eyes to replace the Fizz taken as elemental. New Eldritch implicit modifiers for body armor so they grant Fizz taken as fire, cold, lightning, or chaos. Eldritch chests is how you can do that. Gravicius' signature veiled mod is now banner aura effect instead of Fizz taken as fire, lightning. So here it is. Here it is. Corell's signature veiled mod is now Warcry buff effect instead of Fizz taken as fire. Eldritch implicit glove modifiers. Wait. New Eldritch implicit. So this is not Elder chest piece. It is instead Eater Exarch implicits to get the Fizz taken as fire, cold, lightning, or chaos on body armors. Glove mods that give a chance to aggravate bleeding on targets hit with attacks. Iron Flask now lasts 4 seconds instead of 5. The values for chance to block attack damage and spell block has been increased on cluster jewel notables and timeless jewel passives, and in some cases, even spell suppression. The values for chance to block attack damage and spell block has been increased for regular Abyss Jewels. Regular and Abyss Jewels, rather. Alright, these are all mods that we're giving Overwhelm a chance to ignore. Wand bases, higher attack speed, higher attack speed, higher attack speed, higher attack speed, higher attack speed once. Cool. Higher base crit once. Higher base crit claws. Higher base crit daggers. Higher base crit scepters. Higher base crit staves. Suffix modifiers on shields that provided a percentage of chance to block can no longer roll. We've added a new set of prefix mods for shields that provides increased chance to block. Okay, suffix mods that gave life on block can no longer roll. And buffs to the block on staves. So lots of cool stuff. Block builds. Divination card changes. Rebirth and Renewal now awards a Horned Scarab. More is never enough now gives 4 Veiled Scarabs. The Long Watch Divination card now awards the 4th Vaal unique. Friendship Divination card awards the All's Uprising unique. And then Divination cards disabled that gave 30% quality stuff. Boss exclusive divination cards can no longer be obtained from the following sources of random divination cards: Delve, Eldritch Altars, Expedition, Heist, Incursion, and Ultimatum. So that's going to match stacked decks. If you want a boss exclusive divination card, you must get it from the source that it drops. Probably another boss. Ruthless changes. Good luck with that, guys. Monster balance. Essences now grant increased toughness instead of life to the monster they're affecting, and grant a small amount of increased item rarity and quantity to the monster for each essence affecting them. The higher toughness a monster has, the less damage it takes. A monster with 100% increased toughness takes 50% less damage. A monster with 200% increased toughness takes 67% less damage, and so on. Reduced toughness causes monsters to take more damage. Tormented Spirits now provide 25% rarity and quant for monsters they touch, and 50% rarity for the average spirit possessing a monster. Pinnacle bosses can now have up to 50% action speed reduction, previously 30, which buffs the effective freeze on those bosses. Improve the meteor telegraphing for the players who are targeted by a meteor when they use a flask, and there's now a 2-second cooldown. That's cool. It also probably still kill you. Rare monster mod that overwhelmed fizz reduction now causes you to be crushed. The battering Vaal side area modifier can no longer appear. Purely a wording change. That could have cut down the length of this patch notes by so much. It was like, we removed all overwhelm and changed it to a chance to ignore. Expedition Remnant for overwhelm to ignore. Simulacrum modifiers that granted overwhelm now grant physical damage reduction only instead of the overwhelm. Okay. No more overwhelm and impale chance for simulacrum modifiers. Pure impale chance modifiers can still appear. Okay. Unrelenting timeless Vaal emblems no longer cause overwhelm or penetrate each time they've been revived, and instead cause enemies to deal increased damage. And better telegraphing on the corpse explosion by revenants. Kirac League mods. Essence now costs 6 chaos, previously 3, and causes the area to contain 4 additional monsters instead of 2. Abyss is cheaper. Ambush now costs 4 chaos from 7, and 3 strong boxes from 5. Harbinger, now only 2 Harbingers. Breach gives 3 breaches. Quest reward changes. Bandits have been reworked for 15 all-res, 8% movement speed, 40% life, and 1 passive point if you kill all 3. You have to go and get the golden hand from the crypt level 2 if you want that other passive skill point. All right, and the gems that can be purchased on whatever classes. Act and Pinnacle bosses now have static life bars. I'm still worried about the fact that our buff icons are just going to cover it up. Hopefully they go underneath it. Every time they've showcased it, they have not shown the buff icons. Like, play a Guardian. Just by your Guardian existing, you'll cover up that life bar. Waypoints you don't need to interact with. Reservation effects are persistent through death. One-click harvests. And we can pick up stuff from range. That's going to be so good. And the Scarab Vendor recipe now returns surplus scarabs. Good. And then a bunch of bug fixes. Fixed a bug where you could only throw the black flag into the beacon from certain angles. That's cool. All right, and there we go. That is the patch notes for Settlers of Kalguur, coming just over a week from now. There's a lot in there, a lot of changes, a lot of fun stuff to play with this upcoming Settlers of Kalguur expansion. I am excited. There's so much stuff, but that is where I will end this one. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button as it really helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss more videos from me. If you'd like to help support my channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon just below the video, or by joining to become a member. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.